What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Eastern Current. We got a great guest on here tonight to talk to y'all some more about flounder fishing. This guest has been requested, so I'm excited to have him on for y'all. Before we get into that, definitely go check out Eastern Current Fishing on Facebook. Great place for listeners to come together, build a little community, find some fishing buddies, share some stories, share some pictures. If you do really love this podcast and want to help support us, I'm going to be putting a lot more effort into this and really try to make it part of my job and more of my income as the years progress with Eastern Current. You can check out our Patreon page, and that'll be linked in the YouTube description and the show notes on any of the podcast platforms. So definitely go check that out. It's a huge blessing if y'all do choose to support. If not, definitely just rate our podcast on iTunes or any of the other podcast platforms. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you've been watching it on there, and that all helps as well. And we're stoked to bring this content to y'all. But yeah, let's get into this podcast. We've got Scott Blevins on tonight. What's up, man? How you doing?
What's up?
Oh, nothing much. Scott's been very patient with me. I've been like, hey, let's do a podcast this week, and the whole week passes. I'm like, let's do a podcast next week, and the whole week passes, and we're finally here doing it. So, thanks for being patient with me, man.
Yeah, man, for sure.
So people have been like, hey, have Scott Blevins on to talk about flounder fishing, and it came up beforehand, before the season came in. I think that's kind of when we started talking about it before flounder season came in, but as I followed you on Instagram for a while, I'm like, this guy does catch some serious flounder. And you said tournament fishing is your passion. Do you like to just focus on flounder tournaments, or do you fish redfish tournaments and all kinds of stuff as well?
Yeah, I fish other stuff too, but I suck at it unless it's a flounder.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'll do the red stuff, but I'm not good like you guys are. Yeah, that's not really my thing, but I like the competitive aspect of any type of fishing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think most of us do. So whether it's bass back home in Tennessee or flounder down here, man, I love doing it either way.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it's the competitive aspect. You either like, I love it if I'm doing good, and if I'm struggling that day, it sucks. It's like I hate it so much, and it stresses me out. It's like my whole life is in ruins when I'm like not fishing well in a tournament. And I'm like, God, I'm just gonna quit. I gotta find a new job. Like everything gets turned upside down. But I'm with you. Like the drive, the day of a tournament. And I haven't tournament fished all this summer. I was planning on trying to do some more of it, but it's fun. It brings out a whole new part of you as an angler, that's really cool. So, but yeah, let's talk a little bit about the fishery that you have, because you fish mostly the Cape Fear River and kind of the ocean down there around Oak Island, Bald Head. Do you do much fishing up around Wrightsville Beach and Topsail Beach and Carolina Beach and all that?
Not Carolina Beach for sure.
Okay, Carolina Beach.
Yeah, and we do fish in Wrightsville quite a bit. Wrightsville can be kind of difficult, as you well know.
Yeah.
Especially this time of year with the lizard fish, and that's when you're throwing mullets or whatever for flounder, that can be kind of difficult. But then we fish all the way down to Shallotte, Shallotte River area. That's actually a really good fishery too. But we're fortunate to have the river systems that we do. Like I live in Leland, and I'm like 5 boat ramps within 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So you can, it doesn't matter if it's blowing north, south, east, or west, you can always get out of the wind, or there's always someplace you can go, and they're pretty much all good fisheries. Definitely.
Well, let's talk about this a little bit, because I think this is a good kind of topic. Do you still enjoy flounder fishing when you can't keep them? Were you still going out and targeting flounder like when flounder season wasn't a thing, or were you kind of holding off and waiting for flounder season to open back up?
No, man, for sure. And if anything, man, maybe I enjoyed it a little bit more. To me, it kind of orientated us to thinking more of a or giving a flounder more of a game fish status.
Yeah.
And I hope that the closure provided that, to other people other than just myself. But yeah, I mean, it was fun, man. I mean, to the point, like if you hooked a fish too deep, I was like, damn, man, I shouldn't have let him eat it so long or whatever.
Right.
Because we stayed in the fishery. But yeah, if anything, man, I kind of enjoyed it, more than, and I still throw away a lot of fish. If anybody on here follows me on Instagram, and yeah, I do kill a lot of fish, but they're going in the frying pan for somebody.
Right.
Overall, man, I'm definitely a big advocate of taking care of the fishery and just what we need.
Yeah, I think it did the same thing for me, realizing more than anything, that poor flounder, it's like the mindset of catching a flounder is like you keep it. And I'm all about keeping flounder. It's a delicious fish to eat and whatnot. But I think it did open my eyes up to, I'm like, well, it's fun any fish that you pick out to go target and you successfully target that fish and catch that fish, it's fun. I think the same thing, comes true with flounder, especially in a lot of the fisheries and scenarios we have here. It's a fun fish to target, and it can be any time you can go like successfully catch 10 or 12 of what you're looking for is a fun day of fishing. And I think North Carolina can really provide that with the flounder fishing. And I think this closure's, we've seen. I think everyone's very angry at a flounder right now and wants to fill their freezer up with them. But yeah, I've enjoyed targeting them. I think the best day of flounder fishing I ever had was like a month after they closed it last year, and I was fishing for redfish on the jetty with clients. And I think we had one small fish, and they didn't want to keep fish anyways. And I was like, well, let's go out to the Liberty ship and see if we can find any flounder. And we went out there. First spot we rolled up to, it was every single cast with a mullet for like 2.5 hours. We were just, big flounder, little flounder, everything. And I was like, all right, I like flounder fishing. So, I think we could really have a destination area for flounder, for redfish, for trout if we kind of got our stuff together. That's a whole other podcast. I'm kind of getting in a whole tangent, but let's talk about. Do what?
So cut that.
Yeah, we'll cut it off. But yeah, it's a fun fish to target. Whether you keep it or not. So let's talk about the river fishing a little bit. Like, what do you look for? When you're going out flounder fishing, whether it's a new area or an area you've been to, like what are some of the things that key you off on? This is a spot that I want to flounder fish.
A few things, current breaks, access to deep water or deep water in general, structure. And I think that a lot of times we kind of infatuate ourselves with the idea that flounder relate to structure, right? Like we think of palines or whatever. I don't think the flounder necessarily relate to the structure itself, because a flounder is its own camouflage. It's its own structure, right? He can actually bury in the sand, but they're there because of the food source. Yeah. So, the spots, the pinfish, the croaker, all the stuff that, call these little micro reefs home, that's why the flounder are there. So any type of structure, like I said, deep water, I like fishing deep water, just because I think that those fish don't, aren't as prone to maybe getting stuck in the head the night before. So I think you might have more concentrations of fish there sometimes. Yeah. Sand. I don't like fishing mud. Some guys like to fish mud flats. I don't necessarily like that. If you go out on a low tide and you kind of see like a sandy area with scattered shell rock, like that's primo, kind of primo area. Yeah. Yeah. Current, deep water access. I think Luke was talking about the other day about his biggest fish had been in like 2 feet of water, but it was beside 10 feet of water or whatever. Right. And that definitely makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
definitely. It seems like most fish, that we have, all our inshore fish, our trout, our flounder, our redfish, even down in Florida, snook. I would even say tarpon. I think permit and bonefish could be a little different, but or maybe permit would be the same. But these fish that do get really shallow, they want to be in an area where they can easily flee and be in that that comfortable depth of water. But that being said, I think we talked about that on Luke's podcast as well. It's surprising how many, especially polling and looking for redfish, like how many flounder I spook out of such tiny amount of water, and big ones. Like inches of water. But those are always in areas that are like, very little boat pressure, very little boat traffic and whatnot. But is there a depth that you're like is too deep inshore for you to target flounder in, or is it kind of all across the board?
No, man. Really, if you think about like catching fish at Liberty Ship, you're in 52, 55 feet of water there. No, we catch them in some places in the river, and the cut, obviously, that's 20, 30 feet deep. Yeah. I prefer like 4 to 6. I bucktail a lot, especially when I'm trying to get numbers. So obviously you can't bucktail on Cape Fear River in 30 feet of water, but like a 4 to 6 foot depth with mild current is kind of my preferred area, I guess.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's cool to see how these different species, flounder, redfish, trout, like there's so many different people that target them in so many different ways and so many different little styles of fishing for them, and that's cool. Do you want to explain kind of what you mean by bucktailing for fish?
Yeah, man. First of all, I look like a total moron when I'm doing it, right? Because like I think I counted it up the other day, and you're tapping the rod like 10 times per crank. And what I'm trying to do is, and I talk with my hands on it for the people.
No, that's perfect.
We're trying to, the flounder's here on the bottom, and what I want the bucktail suspended like 3 to 4 inches above his head, just kind of fluttering. I want to make it as easy as possible for that fish to be able to eat that bait, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, like say you bucktail a dock or whatever, and I do it with a live mullet or with a gulp. Just pitch it up there, and you're just working it back real slow, kind of like 45 to the current.
Yeah.
It's preferable. It's hard to do it with the current, and you actually lose a lot of fish that you hook, and it's hard to do it against the current as well, just because the bucktail is not going to stay down toward the bottom.
Right.
It's as far as numbers, man, it's a really, really good way to do things.
Yeah, for sure. And how quick is your retrieve like on the reel? Like, is it like a 1/1000? That's kind of a hard thing to explain, but that's some of the stuff that's hard on the podcast to explain is like retrieve speed and whatnot. But it's a slower retrieve.
It is, man. Yeah, okay. It's a very slow. And again, I'm trying to visualize everything that's going on under the water, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I'm visualizing the bucktail just kind of doing like that, just real slow, where it's just almost effortless for that flounder to come up and suck it in.
Yeah, definitely. It's
probably like one crank per 2 seconds.
Gotcha.
Probably.
Gotcha. With a lot of taps. The cranking is not what's keeping it up. It's the hopping of the rod tip is what is keeping it off the bottom. Gotcha.
It's really hard to articulate how to bucktail, right?
Yeah. So are you doing that with a bucktail jig, or are you doing that with? Is that a term you're using for different lures?
No, that's an actual bucktail.
With a bucktail jig. Okay, that's what I thought you meant. And with a bucktail, are you usually just tipping it with like a certain artificial soft plastic? Is there something that you like to use?
I tip it with an artificial real mullet.
An artificial real mullet. I like it.
Yeah. No, and that's. This time of year, once the mullet are here, that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
If you want numbers, man, a 3-inch gulp shrimp is the way to go.
Yeah, for sure.
A natural color or a pearl white, both of those are really good.
Yeah, I would say most of my artificial flounder come on a white. It's like they'll eat it, and there's a better chance of them seeing it, so I always just go with the white. And that my first flounder fishing like success as a kid was not with a bucktail jig, but there's this area called Old Point up across from Topsail. It's a neighborhood. It's got a bunch of docks, and this was back in like probably middle school. And we would go catch mullet, put them on a jig head, and just pitch them up onto the dock with a jig head, kind of drag them back and hop them back on the jig head. And man, it's very successful. It's not something I do on trips much anymore, but it really is an effective way to fish and a good way to cover water. When you're doing that, are you changing that mullet out as soon as it's dead, or will you still fish them dead on the bucktail for a while?
No, I'll still fish them dead as long as it's not like crusty. As long as it's still pliable.
Yeah.
They're still fine. Gotcha. They don't have to be alive.
They don't have to be alive. Cool. Is that 99% of the time what you're throwing, or you throw anything else? Any other styles of fishing for them?
If I'm not tournament fishing, that's probably 95% of the time.
Gotcha. If you're tournament fishing, what does it change up to?
Just true Carolina rig line.
True Carolina. Gotcha. Cool.
The biggest, ugliest bait I can find.
Yeah, it's crazy how big of baits they'll eat, man. Flounder. I mean, redfish aren't as. You'd think redfish would be like the most aggressive fish that eat the biggest baits, but the baits that I've had trout and flounder throw up, compared to their size, it might not even have been a big flounder, but like the bait size in comparison to the fish is always way more mind blowing than you see with redfish.
Yeah, and they hit it so hard, you're like, dude, how does a 16-inch flounder eat a 7-inch mullet?
Right, exactly.
You get a clean it, it's like hooked in the gills.
Yeah, for sure. Well, cool. So structure, you said, is not something that you necessarily really focus on too much, because you're saying flounder can kind of be their own structure. But do you do a good bit of, like, if you're not fishing man-made structure, are you trying to key in on like oyster bars or points or creek mouths, or is it what kind of stuff are you looking for if not man-made?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not trying to underscore the fact of fishing structure.
Yeah.
More so make a point that I don't think the flounder are necessarily there because they necessarily need structure.
Yeah.
They're there because there's
the bait.
There.
Yeah, that's very
true. As far as, if you're not fishing quote-unquote structure, points are big. If you got an oyster bar on a point, and, if you've done this with redfish, a lot of times, and, back when I used to gig, which is a great way to learn why a flounder does what a flounder does, but, you'll pull up to an oyster bar on a point, and then as soon as the sand starts just beside the rocks is usually where the flounder will lay. Right.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
So it's you're looking for stuff like that, and then again, just scattered shell rock. Flounder don't prefer to lay on an actual oyster bed because they can't really burrow into it. Right. They can burrow beside it in the sand.
Mm-hmm.
It's the thing like fishing, Yopon Reef or Liberty ship, a lot of times you don't catch fish on the big high relief structure because, again, a flounder is not going to sit on top of a boxcar or whatever, more than likely.
Right.
They're going to be sitting down, chilling, tucked in the sand beside the boxcar. So, on that note, I prefer, lower relief structure when you're fishing, offshore stuff.
Yeah.
So like the reef balls and stuff like that.
Definitely. Yeah, I've also heard too, one of the key factors for that, and it's kind of what you're saying, is anything that's lower relief is holding that bait closer to the bottom as well, which is closer to the flounder's reach, whether that be inshore or offshore. Do you fish, when you're in the ocean, do you fish a lot of the man-made structure, or do you try to target ledges, or a little bit of mixture of both?
A little bit of both, man. If you fish off the Oak Island side of our coast, we don't really have a very good bottom until you get out in the 7 to 10 mile range. Compared to if you fish out the Carolina beach side, you've got bottom half a mile off the beach.
Right.
Sheepshead Rock, you could hit a 9-arm to the sand pretty much, right?
Right.
If I'm fishing off the Carolina beach side, I'm probably focusing more on natural lie bottoms.
Mm-hmm.
As far as off the coast of Oak Island, it's no secret that you can go to Yopon Reef and catch fish, right?
Right.
Or McGlamor Reef. It's just that area doesn't have as much natural structure as the eastern side.
Okay.
As the Onslow Bay side, I should say.
Here's something that I want to talk about, because flounder fishing, I've always done a lot of flounder fishing. The ocean flounder fishing is something that has really become is a newer thing to me, just through guiding and doing more family style trips, and it's just something that I've realized, this is a lot of fun to do. It's something I never really tapped into. With this season coming in, I'd scouted a bunch, fishing the Liberty ship and some other popular stuff around Wrightsville Beach. And then season comes in, and you got all these boats sitting on it. Like, how soon do you lose confidence in a spot like that I'm not going to go spend my time out there, after a week and a half of this going on? Or do you feel like, how does that place reload? Do those areas reload pretty quick with fish, or what do you think?
Man, it's just an opinion, but I do think they reload with fish. And because areas in the river, you can beat them up 4 or 5 days in a row, and then nothing, and then you wait a week and go back and there's fish again there.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing happens, off of our beaches too. But if I'm doing that, man, I'll try to spread out. A lot of things that we don't understand, and sometimes when we fish the local reefs or bottoms or whatever offshore, is the actual size of them, man.
Yeah.
They're huge. So everybody usually, the worst thing that can happen is to have a buoy marking the structure, right? Because then everybody thinks they have to fish beside the buoy.
Right.
Unluckily, we have.
Actually, now it might be a better thing to have the buoy. Everyone's around the buoy, and you can go fish out around the outside.
That's right. But man, just move around. Side scan's huge. We've all got the cool new stuff on our boats. Side scan is a huge plus when fishing the reefs.
Mm-hmm.
So much stuff that I see that I didn't see before I had side scan.
Yeah.
So I'll just, if there's a huge congregation of boats, and like Yopon looked like the U.S. Open the other day, right? So, which is cool. And I'll just, I'll turn on the side scan, start, looking for some new stuff, and get out 100 yards away from everybody else and usually catch some fish.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's one thing I do not have, is the side scan. I have not put that on my boat yet, and everyone that has it, that I tell them I don't have it, they look at me like I'm an idiot, because what it really opens up. Do what?
I wasn't going to go that far, man.
Well, the times I fished with it, especially even trout fishing too,
yeah.
Where you can just idle up a creek and be like, oh, there they are. Drop a pin on your GPS, turn around and come back and catch them. It's like, it's stupid if you can, especially as a fishing guide, to not invest in it. But I didn't even realize, because all the side scan stuff I had done has been, under 12 feet of water.
Right.
And so looking at the videos and talking to people, I was actually watching some videos of some guys that catch blackfish up in New York or somewhere, like Tog. And those dudes have it dialed, like, the way that they use their side scan and read that, bottom in like 50, 60 feet of water. And it's pretty much the exact same thing you're doing to flounder fish. Do you feel like you started catching more fish in the ocean when you started using the side scan? Or yeah.
Yeah, I really do, man. Everybody knocks on, everybody's like, kind of talks down to the fact that, everybody has a boat now. Everybody has a Minn Kota, spot lock. Everybody's got a, whatever, side scan, down scan, Panoptics, whatever it may be. But we have these things at our it's a resource that we have available to us.
Right.
Let's utilize it.
And so, sure.
I really do. I can definitely say I've caught a lot more fish, ocean fishing, because of the side scan.
Gotcha. What kind of boat are you running?
22 Skeeter.
22 Skeeter. Sweet.
Yeah.
That's a solid boat. Those Skeeters are really cool. I thought about almost traded my Jones Brothers for a Skeeter about 2 years ago, and decided not to. And now I'm wishing I had, man. I'm having so many issues with that boat, but it is what it is.
The boat, man.
It's a boat. Yeah, it's a boat for sure. But let's talk a little bit about your baits and catching baits and what you like in a bait. So are you only fishing mullet? Tell me, some other baits that you might use, and tell me about like size and whatnot. What's too small? What's too big?
Man, it's a good question, but it all really depends on what you're, if you want to catch numbers or if you want to catch quantity, right? Okay.
We'll share both. Let's go through both.
So for quantity, a bucktail and a 3-inch gulp shrimp, man, that's go-to. Okay. I think you're doing a couple things. Number one, you're covering more water than the other guy on the boat fishing the Carolina rig. You know what I mean? So you're actually you're covering more of the water that you're fishing. And number two, you're not rebaiting every fish or every third cast or whatever it may be. So you just got your lines in the water more. Yeah. Right. So just like a bass fisherman, those guys are throwing 1,000 times a day in a bass tournament, right?
Right.
If you and I go fishing and you're strictly fishing a Carolina rig and I'm throwing a bucktail, I'm probably going to double or triple the number of casts than you will, which a lot of times will equate to increased amount of fish compared to the Carolina rig fishing.
Yep.
But again, it's got to be the right area.
Yeah, definitely.
If you're tournament fishing, I want to have a bait on so big that I have to load my rod like a surf rod to throw it out.
Yeah.
Just a big gnarly bait. I think it's also important that we kind of infatuate ourselves upon it's just mullet or pogies, right?
Right.
That's the only thing that we think we can fish with. And you've cleaned a lot of flounder in your life. How many times have you cleaned a flounder and actually found a pogie or a mullet compared to
almost never?
Exactly, compared to spots, pinfish, croakers, and perch.
Yeah.
All right. So a 6-inch croaker is
money. So talk to me a little bit about how you like to catch those style of baits to use for flounder. I think that's the key. Is like a mullet and a menhaden, you can go out, throw your net once a lot of times and have all the bait you need for the day. Is there a successful way to quickly get a couple baits, and how many is enough baits? Like if you're fishing a larger bait like that and say you want to go fish that style bait all day, how many baits do you need to put in your live well?
Man, like 30 or so, 30 or 40 or so. But that's that's a 2-day process sometimes for me at least. Getting them is hard. I've tried traps with little success. I try to keep them pinned up. Some places you can catch them in a net. Creek mouse. A lot of times you're throwing for shrimp and you catch pinfish, right?
Right.
So kind of the same thing. But yeah, they're a pain in the backside to catch, honestly.
Do you ever catch them hook and line? Is that
with like fish bites.
Yeah.
Or a little squid or shrimp or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's like I'm doing that on Wednesday afternoon because I've got a tournament coming up on Saturday or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not time efficient to go out and actually try to do that.
Right.
In exactly. A time fishing event.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, man. Like a lot of the times when I think I shared this in a podcast I recorded the other night. But I was ocean fishing the other day and looked in the live well. I think we had 5 or 6 fish in the live well. No real big ones. I think our biggest fish was maybe 21 inches, 22 inches, and there was 2 big spot thrown up in the live well, really big spot thrown up in the live well, and none of the flounder were that big, and it's just impressive what they'll eat. Those fish, I think a lot of times they don't want to give up their spot. They don't want to blow their cover in an area for a little small mullet or a little tiny bait fish. They're waiting for a good meal. They've got a really wide mouth and they can eat large baits. Same thing with a trout. It's like very impressive what I've seen some pictures circulate. I'm sure you've seen some of the ones that go on Instagram in the fall where it'll be like a trout with a redfish hanging out of its mouth, or a trout with another big freaking trout hanging out of its mouth. Yeah. So it's crazy what they'll eat.
A lot of times too, like with those big baits like that thump, you feel everybody talks about the thump, which is one of the reasons that we enjoy flounder fishing. But that thump is that you've seen the videos. But that thump is the bait hitting the back of that flounder's gullet or whatever.
Right.
So a lot of the old timers were like, the first time I ever fished in Southport, which was like 16 years ago, this guy was like, we were flounder fishing. He was like, I asked him, I said, man, how long do I need to wait to set the hook? He was like, smoke a cigarette.
Yeah.
And like, you know what I mean? Like, we've all heard this, right? You don't have to do that, man. You can if you want to, but to me, you don't have to. If you feel that thump, 9 times out of 10, if you feel that thump, whenever you get the fish in, you're having to dig that hook out, man.
Yeah, for sure. When they're when they're eating like that, man, yeah, the hook's back there. It's way back there. So we've talked about. I'm trying to think. Oh, let's talk a little bit about like time of day. Do you feel like the time of day really has anything to do with the bite of those fish? Like, do they bite better in the mornings, the evenings? Is it more tide dependent? Does weather have much to do with flounder biting?
Yeah, out of those three, definitely tides.
Tides,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, that's key. And then another important issue is water clarity.
Yeah.
A lot, and again, we're fortunate to live where we do. You can always go to Wrightsville, right, and get good water clarity. The water might be more nutrient rich in the Cape Fear and have more fish, but if Cape Fear looks like soup or whatever mud, then you're simply not going to catch anything there either. So water clarity is a big deal.
Gotcha.
And then tide as well also.
What tide do you prefer when targeting fish?
Man, it's not trying to be ambiguous, but it just totally depends on the spot.
Yeah.
And you know this, man. So many places are tide dependent, just like on a redfish. I mean, they're going to be stacked on a falling tide, and there won't be a fish in a mile on a rising tide, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with the flounder, man. So it's not really. I can't say that I prefer one or the other. I do prefer higher water, especially for bucktailing, because a lot of times we're doing that on grass lines. Mm-hmm. Which obviously, if the water's not high, then there's no water to fish.
Right. I would say that's what I share with people all the time. They're like, that's a huge question from clients. It's like, what tide's best to fish? And it depends on what you want to do, like how you want to target the fish. But two, the fish are going to eat. They eat all tides. I mean, they're doing different things at all tides. It's just a matter of where they are. So throwing a bucktail inshore. First off, what size are you throwing? And second off, do you feel like you can be just as effective with like a jig head and a mullet or a jig head and a soft plastic, or do you think that bucktail and that hair really gets you some more bites?
I don't know, man. It's one of those things like,
it's what you're confident in.
It is. Yeah. If you bass fish and throw a kilo of sunrise worm and that's what you catch fish on, that's what you're going to be good at throwing, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I fish a 5/8 bucktail. It's heavy enough, that works in anywhere from like 2 to 10 feet of water. Mm-hmm. If you got a lot of current. And I feel like it works better. I'll fish with friends or whatever, and they'll throw a 1/4 ounce, just a unpainted lead head, and put a 3-inch gulp shrimp on it, and they'll catch fish. Usually we seem to catch more fish on the bucktail itself, but you can definitely go out there and whack a lot of flounder on just a standard 3/8 or half ounce unpainted lead head with a gulp shrimp.
Yeah. Are you fishing a certain color bucktail or anything like that, or?
Just white.
Just white.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool.
And I've tied all kinds of different stuff. Like I put flashaboo in them. I put sparkles or whatever. I mean, I'm chartreuse. I tried all kinds of stuff. And at the end of the day, man, you throw a bucktail for 30, 40 minutes and you hit 2 or 3 docks with it, and the paint's gone off the head, and there's only like 3 hairs left on it. That bucktail works just as good as that pretty one that you pulled out of the box.
Yeah.
Out of the box.
For sure. Are you usually just using like a Spro bucktail, or do you have a certain brand that you like to use?
I'm using a Blevins bucktail.
A Blevins bucktail. I like it. Tying your own.
Yeah, the 5/8 are actually kind of hard to find, man. The heads, so I have to, pour them myself and do the whole process.
That's awesome.
Anybody listening, if you guys have some deer tails at the end of the deer season, give me a shout.
I got a bunch of deer tails in here that I don't use much deer tail. I'll hook you up with some.
All right.
Well, cool. So, do you fish a bucktail off the beach much at all, or are you mostly bait fishing when you're in the ocean?
No, man, we fish a bucktail.
The
5/8 is hard to fish just because of the depth.
Yeah, definitely.
It works really well, but you catch a lot of non-desirables too, just because you're not getting it down there. So then I'll bump up to like a 1 ounce spray. Gotcha.
Yeah, I would say in the ocean, one of the things I found with the jig is you can up that size like crazy, and kind of, where if your bait's not big enough, you can drop that bucktail down there and kind of get through the lizard fish and the pinfish and catch the actual flounder. Yeah. It was mind blowing. Some of the first times I fished a big jig in the ocean, like the size flounder that would eat a freaking seven massive 7-inch swim bait on a jig head. I'm like, oh my goodness. Yeah. And then you try throwing them inside, and I've caught fish on really big stuff inside, but I typically size it back down a little bit. Do you ever throw really large artificials inshore for flounder, or not really?
Not really, man. Like I've tried tipping the bucktails with like the 4-inch, or I guess a 4.5-inch gulp shrimp.
Yeah.
And they make it. I don't know. I feel like you don't get the same action out of it. I'm not worried about the size of it. I actually like having that larger profile, but I don't think that you get kind of the same action out of it as you do with the 3-inch shrimp.
Yeah, definitely. I think if there's one thing that that comes up in every podcast we do. We talk about weight of sinkers if we're fishing like a Carolina rig or a live bait rig, and then weight of jig heads and artificials. And it's like people like to go with kind of the lighter side of what they can get away with fishing and still be near the bottom. So that definitely plays true with flounder as well. And I feel like flounder more so than trout and redfish, like the action doesn't have to be quite as natural as and maybe this is just me, correct me if you have a different opinion, but it seems like they're more just a little more opportunistic at times than like really having to finesse that exact presentation. Do you see the same thing when you're fishing for them?
Yeah, man, for sure. That's a good point, because if you think about a flounder, like we mentioned earlier, he's actually, it's only species of fish. It's one of the reasons I like him. It's only species of fish that we're literally having to bring the bait to, right?
Right.
He's buried in the sand. So pretty much every bite from a flounder is a reaction bite, right?
Right, exactly.
They're not, a trout's up swimming against the current, waiting on a shrimp to come to him. Flounder's not doing that. Like, he actually has to do a reaction bite for pretty much everything he eats.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that you don't have to be as picky or subtle or whatever with your presentation.
Right.
You put it in his face, man, he's probably going to smoke him.
When you're going down a bank, this is a question and this is something I try to break down for people a lot in videos and whatnot, but when you're flounder fishing and let's just say you're bucktailing inshore, like how many casts are you making going down a bank? Like where do you feel confident that you've covered that water well with a bucktail?
I mean, you look for high percentage areas, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, points or cuts or eddies or, current breaks or whatever. But in general, man, I mean, whenever I pull up to a spot, and I'm trying to basically 1 foot intervals pretty much. So if I can cast 30 feet to the left and then all the way over to 30 feet to the right, I need 60 casts in between the two.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
And that really pays off a lot of times, man. I mean, because a lot of times, and again, that kind of comes back to the bucktail, just because I'm getting so many more casts in than I would if I was fishing with a Carolina rig.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, just covering so much more water.
Do you feel like flounder move to live baits, or do you feel like, because I've talked to some people where when I'm fishing off the beach, they're like, put your live baits down there. When I'm spot locking off the beach, I like to cast and work an area. Some guys like to just sit there straight up and down and wait. They say they're waiting for the fish to like move to them, and I'm like, that just doesn't seem like what flounder are doing. But what's your opinion on that?
I don't know, man. That seems kind of asinine to me.
Yeah.
But to each his own. But yeah, no, and I think that they're obviously going to move, especially throughout different tide cycles. But yeah, I've seen some guys like, man, I caught a 5-pounder here yesterday. I want to sit here all day long, and they will literally sit there all day. And I'm like, man, you caught it on the rising tide. Just go back and fish on the rising tide, right?
Right.
I mean, but no, I don't think the flounder. They ain't coming to us. Pretty much, we got to go to them.
Yeah, definitely.
Is a good way to wrap it up.
Definitely, I'm with you on that. Lots of casts for flounder, because with a redfish, I'll go like every 5 to 8 feet, and depending on what I'm throwing for them, if I'm blind casting, like, if I feel like that bait's got a lot of presence in the water, I'll spread it out a little bit more. If it's a little more finessey, I've tightened those casts up a little bit. But yeah, flounder, they're not going to move very far for what they eat. And the times that I see flounder strike something, like when I'm pulling the boat, they're eating something like right above them. They're barely moving. They're waiting for that bait to come right across their face. And they're fast. They're really quick, but they're not gonna, they don't move a foot to eat something. They move 4 inches to eat something. So that lots of casting.
You've probably seen. I know we've had flounder come up to the boat, right? Like you're in a bait. You've seen it too.
Yeah.
So I mean, they will chase baits, and we've seen the videos from the guys up north that are trolling, and the flounder follows it for 20, 30 yards or whatever before he eats it. So yeah, they will go after it, but if you just look at their general body structure, that's not what they're built for.
Right.
They're built to sit there on the bottom, be camouflage, and ambush fish.
Yeah, definitely.
So I just keep that in my mind, as you try to do it.
Yeah, I'm the same way. It's like, it's funny with this podcast because you start thinking so in detail, like when you're trying to explain something, every little bit of it, and then you're like, sometimes I have to like sit back for a second, like, all right, don't overthink this. Just talk about the main points. But one last thing I kind of wanted to get at, and I just try to get into different people's their heads and to figure out their fishing style and maybe what sets them apart a little bit. But when you go up to an area to throw an artificial inshore, are you moving continually through that area on a trolling motor, or do you like to stop? And what I found best is stopping, but everyone's different. Do you like to stop and like pick that area apart, move to the next spot, pick that area apart? How do you move through the area like that?
Yeah, and I definitely moved through the area, and obviously these are areas that we've more than likely fished before. It's
Right.
totally different if you're scouting. But if you're fishing an area that you fished before and you kind of know where they are, then I'll stop, spot lock it, hit that for 10 minutes or so, catch a fish or two. And then another important point is if you catch a few fish, stay on that area.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that we can say that flounder are schooling fish. I think we probably can. But I know that for a fact that if you find flounder in one area, you're going to continue to find flounder in that area, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So I think that's where it's important to not just continue bass fishing, quote unquote, on down the bank or whatever. If you catch a fish, stop, beat up that area real good, and then continue your path on down.
Definitely. I would say I've learned that flounder are even more patternable than redfish like that. Like if it's a spot where you catch them, it's funny because redfish, a lot of times you can see them, so the confidence in your head is there a little bit more. But the flounder, if there's a little creek mouth that I usually catch a flounder or two on, I can usually go there, every day at that tide and catch a flounder or two on that creek mouth, usually making the same exact cast.
All right.
So
but the key to what you just said was on that tide.
On that tide, yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
How far do you feel like these fish are traveling inshore on different tides? I mean, are they sitting, back in the creek at a high tide, 20 yards, and then laying outside the mouth? Or that's a hard question to answer, but what's your perspective on it?
I don't know, man. I wish we had more. I've done all kinds of research, and I wish we had more tagging research on flounder. I'd love to see more data collected, but I really don't know. You know what I mean? Honestly, they're definitely going to move as the tide cycle moves. Especially if you got a 4 to 6 foot fluctuation of tides, they don't have a choice. But I don't know, to be honest, man.
Yeah, it's you think of a flounder as a fish that doesn't travel much, but they really do. And I think it's the southerns that are our fish that will actually travel. I think Luke was telling me this, 60 miles to spawn. So 60 miles offshore, they're recorded to travel to spawn, which is crazy. And I've caught them pretty far off. I've been grouper fishing, 25, 30 miles off the beach and caught flounder, which is crazy. And catch them on some weird stuff out there too. He'll be jigging like a metal jig or something and catch a flounder on it. And I'm like, they're pretty aggressive out here. But yeah, I'm trying to think is there anything that we haven't touched on that you'd maybe think that is an important piece to bring up?
Man, when I was listening to a podcast the other day, to Tom Rowland's podcast. So you've listened to, and one thing that really kind of hit home with me is he was talking about how he fishes with a guy for tarpon, and whenever they tournament fish, like this guy wins like every tarpon tournament in Islamorada or in the in the Keys, and Tom would ask him like, what are you doing differently than everybody else? And the guy broke it down kind of in numbers, and like whenever he explained it, I was like, oh man, this makes a lot of sense. But it was basically like kind of a percentage thing. So like if you have 100 boats fishing in a tournament, or not even a tournament, if you just got say you've got 100 boats fishing in a day or whatever, if you take care of your boat, if your hubs are greased, if your motor's serviced, all these little things that we kind of take for granted, if you do that and you're good at it, then, roughly 10% of the other guys aren't going to be there. So then you're only fishing against 90% of the crowd. And then he went on to, articulate on, if you're better at throwing a cast net and you can, catch bait quicker than these other guys. Basically, he went on about how, just doing these minor details that you and I have discussed, can basically like kind of take out 50% of the field. And I think it's these things that kind of culminate and come together.
That's sweet. I like that.
To make like a really, to make yourself an excellent fisherman compared to just a good fisherman. But at the end of the day, man, it's all about just going out and having fun.
It is about having fun. But I'm with you, man. Like, people like you and I that really are into this, it's like, all right, there's a point where it's like, it is for fun, but I want to really become the best angler I can be. Because to me, that's fun. That's fun to take this and really break every little asset, every little step of everything down and become the best I can be as an inshore angler. And you see that with guys like you that like the tournament fish. I think it gives you that reason to push yourself to become better. And if you like fishing, and you want to have, a lot of times I have more fun when I'm having a better day of fishing. So why not try to make yourself a little bit better of an angler, along the way. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've had terrible days of fishing where I've had plenty of fun. Right. But we're all out there because we like catching fish. So hopefully this podcast, you guys, has helped y'all a little bit. And yeah, that's a great, that's, I always ask people, like, what do you have to leave with? And that's one of my favorite right there, man. That's awesome.
Okay. Should also probably mention, too, that when anybody listening, we're going to start up a GoFundMe page for Jud to get some side scan.
Yeah, that's awesome. Please do.
Right.
I'm a full supporter of that.
Right.
I know. The transducer is only a couple $100. It's really not that big of a deal.
Yes,
but I just spent all my little play money on some new deer stand stuff, but I need to get side scan bad. I really do. But yeah, if he starts the GoFundMe, I'm all about it. Thanks, guys. Well, cool. I'm going to close her out, man. Thank you so much.
For sure, man. Thank you.
Well, guys, that was a great episode. We'll definitely have Scott back on, and definitely, set yourself apart from everybody else. Really try to find the areas that you can grow at and excel at, and then spend time focusing on those and making yourself a better angler. It is all about having fun, but we want to create, conservation-minded, successful anglers out there here in North Carolina and up and down the coast. So hope y'all enjoyed this podcast. We'll see y'all on the next one. Later.